The security alarm split the mountain silence at exactly 5 in the morning. One sharp metallic shriek that ricocheted through the wooden beams above my bed and yanked me out of the last threads of sleep. Before I even sat up, my phone buzzed on the nightstand once, twice then, a rapid series of vibrations like it was panicking for me. I wasn't panicking, not anymore. I reached for it with steady fingers, already knowing on some instinctive, bone-deep level that this was the moment everything had been building toward. "Miss Lane, the guard," whispered the second. I answered his voice tight with nerves. "I'm so sorry to call so early, but your sister is at the gate." She arrived with a moving truck. 3 men. She's shouting that she owns the property now. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I saw her Sloane, hair perfect, coat expensive, rage simmering beneath practiced confidence. She slammed her fist against my front door and yelled, "Get out now, Harper. This place is mine." Instead of fear, calm rolled through me like a slow, warm tide. I set my coffee cup down on the table beside me, the porcelain making a soft click that somehow grounded me in the chaos. "Let her in," I told the guard. He hesitated, confused. "Let her in," I repeated quietly, eyes still on the screen. "She's about to find out what I did yesterday." The line went silent. Outside, my sister threw her weight against the door again, and I rose from bed without rushing, pulling my robe around my waist as the dawn bled pale light through the trees. It was time. I walked across the cabin floor, the wooden boards creaking under my bare feet. The cold air carried the scent of pine and last night's embers from the fireplace. It was a peaceful morning had been anyway before Sloane decided to arrive with an audience and a stack of lies she thought would crush me. I paused by the window, peeking through the curtain. The moving truck angled across my driveway like a threat. The 3 hired movers stood awkwardly near the porch, exchanging uncertain glances as Sloane barked orders. She was waving papers in the air, documents I'd already seen, already analyzed, already disproven. Documents she thought would put me in the ground. I tapped my tablet awake and brought up the full security feed. Every angle of the cabin flickered to life: the porch, the hallway, the living room, the office door. Technology had become my shield these past months, though Sloane didn't know that yet. She didn't know anything really, not about who I'd contacted, not about the evidence I'd gathered, not about the legal trap she was standing in the center of. The guard's voice replayed in my head. "She says she owns the property now. Of course she did." I tied my robe tighter, exhaling slowly as I watched her through the camera. She looked exactly as she always had, polished, perfect, and certain the world existed to hand her whatever she desired. That certainty had been there since childhood. It had been reinforced by our parents again and again: Sloane as the achiever, the heir, the golden child. Me as the burden, the afterthought, the girl who became a mother too young and a single mother too soon. "Harper," she yelled through the door, her voice shrill enough to cut through the walls. "Stop hiding. You know you signed everything over?" My lips curved, not quite a smile, more like disbelief at how far she'd taken this performance. I moved through the cabin slowly, deliberately, not hiding, not afraid, just waiting. The cabin itself was a protective cocoon of warm wood and the faint smell of lavender from last night's bath. It looked nothing like the unstable, chaotic place Sloane had painted in her stories around town. She had told anyone who'd listen that I couldn't keep up with the property, that I was overwhelmed, forgetful, unstable. Her lies had slithered through the community like wildfire, turning warm smiles into pitying glances. But the truth lived here, in the way everything was clean, organized, lovingly maintained, in the way Ellie's drawings still hung on the fridge, in the way the morning light caught the edge of the dining table I'd refinished myself. I checked the porch camera again. Sloane paced back and forth, hair swinging like an impatient metronome. She turned to the movers, voice clipped. The homeowner agreed to vacate. "We're here to start. Just open the door." One of the movers scratched his head. "Ma'am, we can't break in." This doesn't feel right. Sloane spun on him with a fury I knew too well. She's incompetent. She's struggling. She signed everything over. Do your job. I zoomed in on her face, the anger twisting her features into something feral. The camera caught it all, every snarl, every threat, every false claim. Perfect evidence. My phone buzzed with a text. Marin Pierce. Remember, do not engage until law enforcement arrives. Let her talk. Let her hang herself. I breathed in deeply. This whole morning, the entire nightmare unfolding on my porch was the final chapter of a story that started months ago, long before Sloane stole a key, forged my name, or whispered lies into the ears of anyone who'd listen. It started when she walked into this cabin months earlier and looked around like it was already hers. It started when our parents told her she deserved something nice after her promotion. It started when my ex-husband Evan began showing up with too sweet smiles and too many questions about my finances. Signs I ignored then. But I wasn't ignoring anything now. I moved away from the window and stood behind the front door, listening to her rage simmer and boil. The early morning cold seeped through the wood, but I felt steady, more steady than I had in months. I touched the deadbolt lightly but didn't unlock it. Instead, I walked to the dining table, picked up my tablet again, and tapped open a video file labeled Evidence Previous Day. The recording played Sloane and Evan inside my home, whispering about selling it, plotting to take Ellie, bragging that I would never see it coming. I closed the file but kept the tablet in hand. There was no more running, no more fear. I was ready. And before I let Sloane into my home, into the trap she built for herself, I needed to take you back. Back to when all of this began. Back to the first moment I realized the people who claimed to love me were preparing to take everything I had left. Because that's where this story truly begins. I used to think peace was something fragile, like thin glass that could shatter with the smallest tap. But back then, before everything unraveled, peace didn't just feel stable. It felt earned. I'd carved a quiet life out of the jagged rocks of everything. I'd survived the single motherhood, the divorce, the years of scraping by the subtle family judgments that cut deeper than outright cruelty ever could. The cabin was my retreat, a small place tucked into the Montana mountains, overlooking pines that whispered with every shift of wind. I bought it 3 years after leaving Evan, when Ellie was still a toddler and I was learning how to breathe again. It wasn't large, 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with windows that filled with sunlight every morning, a living room with a stone fireplace that crackled like an old friend. But it was mine. For the first time, something was truly mine. Our days were simple then. I'd wake early, make coffee, sit on the porch wrapped in a blanket while Ellie slept inside, her tiny breaths fogging the bedroom window. When she woke, she'd crawl onto my lap, wide-eyed and warm, asking if she could feed the birds. We spent afternoons hiking, drawing, baking banana bread that never lasted more than a day. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was full, quiet laughter, safety, and the feeling that Ellie and I were finally building a world without fear. Of course, Sloane never understood that kind of peace. My sister lived in Denver in a waterfront condo with floor-to-ceiling windows. She bragged about every chance she got. She worked in corporate finance and had a knack for entering a room like she owned it. Our parents worshipped her, the golden child, the woman with the high salary, the perfectly highlighted hair, the boyfriend who looked good in every photo. Next to her, I had always been the problem child, the girl who got pregnant at 20, the one who divorced young, the one who needed help even when I didn't. When I bought the cabin, my mother's first response wasn't joy. It was suspicion. How could you possibly afford something like that? Harper, did Evan help you? I told her no. He hadn't. He never had. It was the result of 3 jobs, 6 years of savings, and the settlement I earned in the divorce, after proving he'd drained our accounts to fund his own side projects. My father's response was worse. It's irresponsible, he said. You should have bought something near family, somewhere we can support you. Support. They always used that word when they meant control, so I stopped sharing details. I sent fewer photos. I stopped inviting their opinions, and eventually they retreated into their comfortable orbit around Sloane just as they always had. That's why the day I got the call from Sloane in early spring was so unexpected. I was in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, coaxing early tomatoes to life. My phone buzzed, and when I saw her name, I nearly ignored it. But curiosity won. "Well," she said, breezing into the call, "I guess you didn't think to tell me you lived in an actual postcard." "I didn't think you cared," I replied, brushing soil from my hands. "Mom mentioned you'd moved, and I was in the area for a meeting, so I figured, why not drop by? Ellie must be so big now." The way she said it, light, casual, harmless, made the old cautious part of me stir. Sloane never did anything casually. 2 hours later she arrived. She stepped out of her car with a wide smile, sunglasses, perched in her hair, her coat crisp, and tailored her stride confident. She hugged me tightly, too tightly, her perfume enveloping me before I could brace for it. "My God, Harper," she said, looking around. "This place is stunning. I never expected something like this from you." From you. She always slipped those words in like she couldn't help reminding me of who she believed I was. Ellie was shy at first, hiding behind my leg, but Sloane crouched down, offering her a little necklace shaped like a star. Ellie's eyes lit up. I remember thinking it was sweet of her, generous even. But generosity was never Sloane's default setting, not without purpose. We spent the afternoon together. I made lunch, rosemary chicken, and roasted vegetables, and Sloane walked through the cabin like she was taking inventory. She admired the fireplace, inspected the pantry, opened closets, commented on the windows, not like a guest, like an appraiser. "You must feel so lucky," she said, as she ran her fingers across the mantel. "A place like this, God, it must be worth a fortune." "I'm grateful," I said carefully. "It's home." We sat on the porch afterward as Ellie played in the yard. The mountains were painted gold by late afternoon sun, and I could almost forget Sloane's earlier comments. "It's good you have something stable," she murmured, sipping tea. "Especially with everything you've gone through." Everything you've gone through. Another phrase she loved. A reminder of every failure she believed I carried. Still, I tried. I always tried with her. I talked about Ellie's drawings, the daycare she loved, the work-from-home bookkeeping job I'd taken on. And for a moment, Sloane almost seemed human, warm, interested, even proud. "I'm glad you're finding your footing," she said softly. Really. But when she left that evening, hugging me once more, I felt off balance. Something about her visit didn't sit right. Maybe it was the questions she'd asked about the mortgage, the property taxes, the deed. Maybe it was how long her eyes lingered on the framed documents in my office. Or maybe it was the way she said goodbye. "You deserve good things, Harper, especially now. Don't mess it up." The next few weeks passed quietly, the memory of her visit softening like bruises that fade but don't fully disappear. Ellie and I returned to our routines, morning porches, evening stories, hikes on weekends. And yet there was a subtle shift in the air, like something waiting, something watching. The shift became undeniable when my parents called. I heard Sloane visited, my mother said. "What did she think of the cabin?" I hesitated. "She liked it." "Oh good," my mother breathed. "She said you seemed scattered, that you were struggling to manage everything on your own, that she was worried." My stomach clenched. "She said what she said, she might help you get organized. You know, Sloane, she wants the best for you." That night, after Ellie went to sleep, I sat by the fire with a knot in my chest. Sloane had been in my home for 3 hours, and in that time she'd already begun painting a narrative. Not one of support, one of weakness, one of instability, one of incompetence. The next morning at the grocery store, the cashier's tone changed. Polite but distant, curious but guarded. It was small, subtle but real. And then the woman at the post office. The comment about my overwhelmed expression. The neighbor who asked if I needed help shoveling my own walkway, a task I'd always done without question. The whispers grew slowly like roots beneath frozen soil. Sloane was planting something. And I didn't yet understand how deep it went. I didn't know in those early days that my sister hadn't just admired the cabin. She wanted it. She wanted all of it. I didn't know she'd already begun her plan, but the first seed of unease had taken root, and soon everything would sprout into something far darker than I was prepared for. The day Evan showed up again, the air felt wrong too, still too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. I was cleaning paintbrushes on the porch, while Ellie napped, enjoying one of those rare moments where the world softens and time loosens its grip. Then his car appeared at the bottom of the driveway, crawling up the hill, like it was climbing back into a life it had no right to return to. I froze, brush still dripping water my breath, caught somewhere between my throat and my chest. Evan stepped out wearing that familiar half-smile, the one that had fooled me when I was young and tired and desperate for someone to make life feel easier. That smile was a lie then, and it was a lie now. "Harper," he said, walking toward me, as if we were old friends. "You look good." "I wasn't expecting you," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Is everything okay?" Yeah, he said too quickly. "I was just in the area. Thought I'd stop by, check on you and Ellie, check on us." He hadn't checked on anything in years. He'd barely paid child support, never remembered birthdays, never called unless he wanted something. Still, I stepped aside. "She's napping. You can come in." He smiled wider and something inside me tightened. Evan only smiled like that when he'd rehearsed something. Inside, he wandered through the living room. Like Sloane, had eyes flicking over the mantel, the bookshelves, the framed deed hanging above my desk. He lifted the corner of a quilt I'd made, inspecting the stitches like a judge at a fair. When he turned back to me, he wore feigned admiration. "You've really done well for yourself," he said. I crossed my arms. "What do you want, Evan?" He laughed, holding his hands up like I'd accused him of stealing. "Nothing. Just being nice." But Evan was never nice without purpose. He walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, watching me with an expression that made my skin crawl. "You know, I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe we should revisit the custody agreement." I stared at him. He didn't mean equal custody, not with his travel-heavy job and late-night bar outings. No, this was something else. "You have barely seen her this year," I said quietly. "I know," he said, shrugging. "But maybe it's time I take on more responsibility. Ellie deserves stability." I let out a slow, controlled breath. "She has stability." "Does she?" His eyes flicked purposely toward the living room, toward the scattered toys, the half-folded blanket, the unopened mail on the table. And then it hit me like a punch. This wasn't about Ellie. This was about the cabin. The word stability wasn't a concern. It was a weapon. "What did Sloane tell you?" I asked. He paused, the smallest hesitation, then forced a laugh. "Sloane, why would she tell me anything? You and my sister have never had a phone conversation longer than a minute," I said. "You two don't even like each other." He didn't respond, but I saw it, just a flicker, the recognition that he'd been caught. He shifted his weight. "Look, Harper, I'm not saying you can't handle things. I'm just concerned. It's a lot. The property, the kid, everything." I stepped closer, letting my voice drop. "You're not concerned. You're circling. And I want to know why." He didn't meet my eyes. "We'll talk later," he muttered, already stepping toward the door. "I have somewhere to be, Evan." He stopped. "Whatever you and Sloane are planning, it won't work." His shoulders tensed. He didn't turn around. He didn't deny it. He just left. The next afternoon, I decided to clear my head at the hardware store in town. I needed soil and replacement bulbs for the porch lights. It was supposed to be a simple errand. But as soon as I walked in, I felt eyes on me, quick glances, looks that shifted away the moment I met them. The cashier, a kid barely out of high school, said politely, "Doing okay today, Miss Lane." I nodded, though confusion prickled under my skin. "I'm fine. Why?" "Oh, nothing," he said, scanning my items too fast. "Just heard you've been under a lot of stress. Keeping up with the cabin and all." My stomach dropped. "Who told you that?" He blinked. Oh, I'm not sure. It's just what people are saying. People. As I walked to my car, I noticed Margaret, the neighbor from down the road, watching me from across the parking lot. But when I lifted my hand to wave, she looked away, pretending to examine a display of sunflower seeds. The ground beneath me felt suddenly unstable. It got worse. By the end of the week, 3 different people had asked if I was managing all right. Someone from Ellie's daycare emailed to check in. A woman from the post office pulled me aside and whispered that if I was struggling emotionally, there were support groups in town. Support groups. For what I hadn't told a soul about struggles. I hadn't shown any signs of instability. But the narrative was spreading quiet as frost cold as doubt. And Sloane's words from her visit whispered back to me, "You deserve good things, Harper. Don't mess it up." That night, after Ellie fell asleep, I sat at the dining table surrounded by bills, statements, receipts, neatly organized in the way my mind always operated. There were no missed payments, no overdue notices, no signs of the chaos Sloane and Evan were implying. So why did everyone think otherwise? I replayed the moments with Sloane in my head, her fingers trailing over shelves, her lingering glances at the deed, the questions she asked about taxes and upkeep. She hadn't come to admire my life. She'd come to assess it. And Evan's sudden reappearance wasn't a coincidence. Then the moment that made everything click hard and fast. While taking the trash out, I saw something glinting between the garbage bins. A piece of paper half buried in old leaves. I picked it up. A printed listing for my cabin. Estimated value obscenely high. Enough to change someone's life. But it wasn't the listing that made my hands shake. It was the note at the bottom. Sloane's handwriting. Need appraisal. Ask Evan about custody leverage. My throat closed. Custody leverage. They weren't just trying to take my home. They were preparing to take my daughter. I sank onto the porch steps, cold biting through my clothes. My mind raced flashes of conversations, looked small inconsistencies. The way Evan inspected the house like he was imagining ownership. The way Sloane probed my finances. The growing whispers in town. The sudden concern from strangers. They were building a case, painting me as unstable, setting the stage for intervention. And that's when the fear transforms slowly, then, all at once, into anger. Pure hot anger. Not loud, not frantic. Focused. Steady. A part of me I thought had died during the divorce rose quietly inside my chest. A part that remembered I'd survived worse. A part that remembered I wasn't weak, not then, not now. I stood up, went inside, locked every door, and pulled out my laptop. If Sloane and Evan were building a case, I would build something stronger. Evidence, security, strategy, war. I didn't know the full extent of what they were plotting yet, but I knew they had begun something they couldn't control. And I knew one more thing with absolute clarity: I was going to find out exactly what they were planning. Before they found a way to take everything from me, I didn't sleep the night I found Sloane's handwritten note. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every strange comment, every lingering glance she'd cast around my home. Evan's sudden reappearance, the whispers in town, the way people looked at me like I was unraveling in front of them. By dawn, my chest felt hollow, my eyes burned, and something inside me had hardened into resolve. When Ellie woke, I forced a smile, made pancakes, braided her hair, and sent her to daycare with an extra hug. But the moment her bus pulled away, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the county recorder's office. If Sloane and Evan were planning something, it would show up in the one place they couldn't hide from bureaucracy. The county building was small, old brick, with a clock tower that chimed every hour. Inside, everything smelled like paper and printer toner. A clerk with silver glasses glanced up from her desk. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, swallowing past the knot in my throat. "I'd like to check recent filings for my property." "What kind of filings?" "Any," I said. "All. Transfers, liens, inquiries, anything that mentions the address." She raised a brow, but typed quickly. The screen reflected in her lenses. After a moment, she frowned. That's strange. My pulse spiked. There was an inquiry filed last week, she said, and another document flagged for review. Flagged for what verification, she replied. It looks like part of a transfer process, but it's incomplete. I stepped closer. Can I see it? I can't show you the full file, she said apologetically, but I can tell you the name listed on the inquiry. Her voice dropped into a whisper. Sloan Lane. I felt everything inside me go cold. Was my signature on it? I asked quietly. She hesitated. I'm not allowed to discuss signatures. That was my answer. My sister had submitted paperwork pretending to be me. Pretending she owned my home. Pretending I had relinquished it. I stumbled back toward the parking lot on numb legs. The sun was too bright, the air too sharp. I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers ached. She forged something. She must have. But what? The only way to know was to dig deeper. Instead of going home, I drove to a small coffee shop on the edge of town. I ordered a drink I didn't taste and sat in the far corner with my laptop. My hands trembled as I logged into my bank, my email, anything that might show signs of tampering. Nothing obvious. But then I checked my spam folder, normally empty. A subject line froze my breath. Welcome to Cedar Ridge Property Solutions. I clicked. Inside was a standard welcome packet thanking Harper Lane for beginning the process of estate consolidation and property transition. My heart slammed against my ribs. Estate consolidation. Property transition. Those weren't words you used for updating addresses. They were words you used when transferring real estate ownership. And the kicker, the name listed at the bottom, primary contact S. Lane. I closed the laptop, pressing my palms against my eyes until I saw sparks. For a long moment, I just sat there, chest shaking, the reality settling like sand, drowning a foundation. Sloan wasn't planning. She had already begun. I left the cafe in a daze, the world blurred at the edges. I don't even remember driving home, only the moment I walked into the living room and saw the cabin with new eyes. My sanctuary. My safe place. My little girl's home. They were trying to steal it. I sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour trying to slow my breathing. I needed proof. More than blurry lines and suspicious filings. I needed undeniable evidence of what they were doing. The chance arrived sooner than I expected. That evening, while Ellie colored on the floor, my phone buzzed with a text from Sloan. Going to be near your area tomorrow. Thought I'd stop by. Need to check on you. Things seemed messy last time. Messy. I stared at the word like it was a threat. I typed back, sure, come, anytime. If she wanted to snoop again, I'd let her. But this time I'd be ready. The next morning I dropped Ellie off early and hurried home. I swept through the cabin, noting every drawer, every piece of paper, every folder. I placed a small audio recorder inside my office, hidden behind a stack of binders. Another went behind the lamp in the living room. They were cheap devices, nothing fancy but clear enough if she said anything incriminating. At 9:47, her car crunched up the gravel drive. I forced myself to breathe normally. She knocked with that polite rhythmic pattern she'd always used growing up, 3 short taps, 1 long. Harper, I brought muffins. Like this was a sister dropping by for coffee. I opened the door. Come in. She stepped inside, her eyes immediately sweeping the space. She wore a soft cream sweater and a bright, calculated smile. I wanted to check on you, she said warmly. You seemed overwhelmed last time. There it was again, overwhelmed. We sat at the kitchen table and she pushed a bakery box toward me. Cranberry orange, your favorite. I didn't touch them. How's work? I asked. Oh, great, she said breezily. Busy. You know how it is. She didn't ask about my job. She never did. Her gaze wandered again to the fridge, to the mail pile, to the hallway leading to the office. House still in good shape? She asked too casually. It's fine, I replied. Doesn't it feel like a lot to manage? She pressed. Especially with Ellie so little and all that space. I kept my face neutral. Not really. She sipped her coffee, hiding a smirk behind the cup. A place like this, she said, softly deserves someone who can really take care of it. Someone like her. Then, she leaned forward, lowering her voice as if delivering advice. You should let me help you, Harper. I could take some of the load off. We both knew she didn't mean chores. You mean financially? I asked calmly. Or legally, she said, shrugging. Whatever you need. I know these things are confusing for you. Confusing. The third time she had hinted at it. I folded my hands. What exactly are you offering? She reached into her purse. My breath hitched. A folder. The same style as the one she'd waved at the movers days later. She slid it across the table. Just a few forms to help me manage things for you. Nothing big. But it would protect you. And Ellie. I didn't touch them. Why do you think I need protection? I asked. She tilted her head, feigning sympathy. Because you're struggling. I stared at her until her smile faltered. Sloane, I said quietly, I'm not signing anything. Her cheeks tightened, but the smile stayed. Of course it did. Well, she said, rising from her chair, think it over. I'm only trying to help. She let herself out the door, closing with a soft click behind her. I didn't move until I heard her car disappear down the road. Then I darted to retrieve the audio recorders. I replayed every second, her words sweet as poison. Someone who can take care of it. These things are confusing for you. You're struggling. Let me manage things for you. It wasn't a conversation, it was preparation. A narrative. A foundation for the lies she planned to tell later. I saved the audio files. Labeled them, backed them up twice, and then I sat on the edge of my bed, fingers trembling around my phone. I needed professional help, not emotional, legal, before Sloane and Evan could close their trap on me. Before I woke up one morning and found a stranger's name on the deed to my home. That night, as the last light faded behind the mountains, I found the number of a property attorney and typed a message with shaking hands. My sister is trying to take my house. I hit send. Then I whispered into the dark, You won't win, Sloane. I didn't know it then, but that message would become the turning point. The beginning of a counterattack I never imagined myself capable of. The first step in proving I wasn't the weak one. Not anymore. The envelope looked ordinary at first, cream-colored, folded neatly tucked between a gardening magazine and a coupon booklet in my mailbox. If I hadn't been paying attention, I would have tossed it into the recycling bin and kept walking. But something about the weight of it, the thickness, the way my name was printed, formal, centered, almost official, made my fingers tense. I carried it back into the cabin, dropped my keys on the counter, and slid my thumb beneath the seal. The moment I opened it, a cold rush moved through me like a winter draft. Harper Sloane Holdings, LLC, the letter began. My vision blurred for a second. LLC. Holdings. Sloane's name fused with mine. I flipped through the papers, 6 pages, all printed in the same sterile corporate font. The first page thanked me for my interest in estate consolidation and streamlined property management. The second page listed the registered address, my cabin. The third page named the managing members, Harper, Lane, and S. Lane. I gripped the edges so hard the paper bent. My signature appeared at the bottom of the 4th page. Except it wasn't mine. It looked close enough to fool a stranger, but the slant was wrong. The H was too sharp, the loop in the P too wide. A counterfeit version of myself. Someone had signed for me. Someone had filed this. Someone had created a company with my name on it. And that someone was my sister. I stumbled backward until I hit the kitchen island, the breath knocked out of me. My heart beat in jagged bursts. I could hear the mountain wind outside, rattling the windows like it was trying to warn me. I forced myself to move. I spread the papers across the countertop, flattening them, examining every line. The LLC had been registered 10 days ago. The filing date aligned perfectly with the uptick in rumors about me. The paperwork referenced anticipated asset transition. The listed purpose of the company was family property oversight. my property, my cabin, my life. I pressed my palms into the wood. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I wasn't even angry yet. I was numb, like my mind was struggling to understand the full shape of what I was seeing. Then, a cold, sharp sentence cut through the numbness. She's already acting like the owner. I opened my laptop, logged into the county recorder's website, and searched my address. The results loaded. My stomach turned. Status pending transfer. Document under review. I leaned closer, reading and rereading the text, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something sane. Pending transfer. Under review. Someone had tried to move my property into an LLC without me, behind my back, using a signature that wasn't mine. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as the truth assembled itself piece by piece. Sloane hadn't been planting seeds. She'd been executing a plan. I clicked deeper into the filing details. The submitted by field listed Authorized Representative S. Lane. Of course it did. For a moment the room spun. I gripped the edge of the counter until the dizziness passed. Then I inhaled slowly through my nose and held the breath until my lungs burned. I needed to know how much damage had been done. I searched my email next. Nothing from the county. Nothing from any notary. But when I opened my spam folder, usually empty, I found it. A welcome message from a property management firm I'd never contacted. Thank you for beginning your transition process. Transition. That word again. Over and over. The attached packet included onboarding instructions, instructions for future asset reporting, and worst of all, a scanned copy of the authorization form. My forged signature glared up at me. Below it, in clean, bold letters, was the contact name for the process, Sloane Lane, authorized agent. I covered my mouth with my hand. She was already prepping to take the cabin legally. And if she managed to finalize the transfer, reversing it could take months, years. And if she paired it with lies about my stability, lies she was already spreading, she could claim she was acting in my best interest. A sickening clarity washed over me. These weren't random rumors. They were a foundation, a storyline. She's overwhelmed, she's forgetful, she's struggling, she can't manage everything alone. Each whisper was a brick in the narrative she needed to take everything from me. Not just the cabin. Maybe even Ellie. The thought made my vision darken at the edges. I shoved the laptop aside, grabbed my phone, and started flipping through old documents, my mortgage, my divorce records, insurance papers. I spread them out across the table, comparing my actual signature to the forgery. Mine was smooth, consistent, fluid. The signature on the LLC paperwork was tighter, rushed, like someone had practiced but never mastered the shape. I snapped photos, organized them into folders, labeled each one carefully. If Sloane wanted a legal fight, I'd give her one. Next, I checked the notary stamp. The registration number didn't match any of the official codes used in Lincoln County. I cross-referenced 3 different databases. Nothing. Fake notary. Fake stamp. Fraud layered on fraud. My hands shook not with fear, but with a strange rising fire. She wasn't just manipulating people. She was committing crimes. I stood there in my kitchen, surrounded by paper and evidence, and the ghost of my sister's handwriting when something inside me hardened. I picked up the envelope again, smoothing out the creases. This wasn't a defeat. It was proof. The kind of proof that would matter in court. My phone buzzed. A message. From a contact saved under the letter P. A man I'd spoken to once before, months earlier, when I suspected something was wrong but didn't have words for it yet. You still need help, he'd written back then. At the time I'd told him no. Now I opened the thread. Yes, I typed. It's worse than I thought. I need to meet tomorrow. His reply came instantly. Bring everything. A tremor of relief rolled through me. I gathered every sheet of paper, placed them into the folder where I kept Ellie's school records, and locked the folder in my desk drawer. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the mountains' dark silhouettes against a rising sun. The air was cold, sharp enough to sting my lungs. A hawk circled above the treetops, gliding effortlessly, watching everything from a vantage point no one else could touch. I whispered into the quiet room, "You think I'm confused. You think I'm weak." My reflection in the glass stared back at me, tired but not defeated. "But now I know exactly what you're doing. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not this time. Not ever." Marin Pierce's office sat on the second floor of an old brick building in town, the kind with narrow hallways and framed black and white photos of pioneers who looked like they'd wrestled mountains into submission. I climbed the stairs, gripping the thick folder of forged documents so tightly my knuckles hurt. The morning air outside had been icy, but inside the building, I felt overheated, wired, like my body didn't know whether to run or collapse. Her door was slightly ajar. A brass plaque read Marin Pierce Property and Estate Law. I knocked once. "Come," in a steady voice called. She was exactly what I hoped for, mid-40s, silver streak through her dark hair sleeves, rolled-up glasses perched low on her nose. A woman who looked like she'd never panicked a day in her life. She stood when I entered, extending her hand. "Harper Lane," she said, as though confirming the name she'd been expecting. "Sit. Start from the beginning." I didn't even make it through the full story before her expression sharpened her pen, pausing mid-sentence. When I spread the forged LLC paperwork across her desk, her jaw tightened. "Where did you get these?" "They were mailed to my home, yesterday. And this signature," she tapped it. "Not mine. She studied it carefully. Someone practiced." "Not enough, but enough to fool a clerk." My throat tightened. "My sister filed these." "Or started to." She met my eyes. "Tell me everything." So I did. The rumors. Evan's sudden appearance. Sloane's visit with the muffins and the folder she pretended was harmless. The welcome packet in my spam folder. The pending transfer notice on the county site. The notary number that didn't exist. By the time I finished, Marin leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, assessing me, not with pity, but with a certain quiet respect. "This isn't carelessness," she said. "It's calculated." "I know. It's deliberate." "I know. And it's a pattern I've seen before. That made something inside me go cold." "What do you mean people target family members?" she said calmly. "Especially women. Especially single mothers. Especially those who built something they didn't expect you to build." She tapped her pen twice on the desk. "This is a textbook setup for financial exploitation." The words hit like a punch, not because they were new, but because hearing them out loud made everything real. I swallowed hard. "Can it be stopped?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Yes, but only if we're strategic." "What do I do?" She leaned forward. "First, you cannot confront them. Not yet. If you do, they'll retreat and regroup. They'll hide their tracks. They'll be careful." She tapped the documents. "We need them overconfident, careless, feeling in control." I exhaled shakily. "They already think I'm overwhelmed, and that's your advantage. Let them think it. Let them think you're easy to manipulate." Her voice softened just a fraction. "Even if you're not." My jaw clenched. "I'm not. I know." She opened a drawer and pulled out a blank set of forms. "Here's what we're going to do." She walked me through it step by step. "We'll protect the property by transferring it into a revocable living trust. You'll be both grantor and trustee that keeps you in complete control. And we'll file a quiet title action to temporarily seal the record." I blinked. "Seal it, public searches will show the status as in transition. That will confuse them. They'll think their filings are working or that the county is simply slow. They won't realize your cabin is legally untouchable." A breath I didn't realize I'd been holding finally left my lungs. "And if they try to submit more forged documents, they'll fail." Marin's eyes sharpened. "That's the second part. We gather evidence. Every text. Every visit. Every rumor. Every forged signature. And especially she pointed at the LLC page, this fake notary seal. It's felony-level fraud. My pulse thudded. You're sure? I'm certain. She made a few quick notes, her pen moving fast. I'll also run a search for the notary name. If the person denies witnessing this, we have confirmation of forgery. And if someone created the stamp intentionally, that's a criminal accomplice. My head spun, but my resolve solidified. What about recording them? I asked quietly. Do it. She nodded. Montana is a one-party consent state. You can legally record any conversation you're part of. Install discrete cameras and audio in key areas, living room, kitchen, porch. If they bring more paperwork, let them talk. Let them reveal themselves. I nodded slowly. So, I pretend to cooperate. You stall, she corrected. You need time. If they think you're resisting, they'll escalate faster. If they think you're hesitant, stressed, confused, they'll relax. And when they relax, they'll make mistakes. I sat there staring at the papers on her desk. The forged signature, the brazen lies, the cold confidence behind each stroke of ink. I hadn't realized until that moment that I'd been holding myself together with sheer instinct. Now that someone else finally saw the truth, the adrenaline drained out of me all at once. My hands trembled against my lap. Marin noticed. Harper, she said gently, you're not failing. You're being targeted. My eyes stung. It was the first kind thing anyone had said to me in months. I just want to keep my home, I whispered. For me, for Ellie. And you will, she said with absolute certainty. But you have to trust this process. I nodded, wiping my face quickly. Marin slid a legal pad toward me. Here's your checklist. Install cameras today. Keep written logs. Screen record everything from the county site. Save every text and voicemail. Don't sign anything even if they pressure you. I wrote each instruction down. And Harper, I looked up. Don't let them see you as a threat. Fear will make them sloppy. Sloppy makes them traceable. A spark of something fierce lit in my chest. Yes, I said quietly. I understand. We spent the next hour reviewing potential scenarios, what Sloan might try, how Evan might intervene, how far they could legally push before crossing criminal lines. Every hypothetical made my stomach twist, but Marin had an answer for each one. By the time I left the office, the folder in my hands felt lighter, not because the situation was any less terrifying, but because I finally had armor, a plan, a path forward. Outside, the wind cut across my face, sharp and cold. The mountains loomed in the distance, solid and unmoving. I walked across the parking lot, slowly breathing deeply, letting the air clear the ache in my chest. Before getting into my car, I checked my phone. A new message from Sloan. Thinking of stopping by again soon. Let me know if you need anything. Need. As if she wasn't trying to dismantle everything I'd built. I typed back exactly what Marin would want me to type. Actually, maybe. Let's talk soon. Her reply came instantly. Perfect. I'll come tomorrow. I locked my phone and slid behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel as the engine started. Tomorrow. My sister thought she was walking into a house full of weakness. But tonight I'd be installing cameras. Tomorrow I'd let her talk. And soon, very soon, she'd realize she hadn't been setting a trap for me. She'd been walking straight into mine. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the late afternoon light had shifted into that soft golden haze that makes the mountains look like a painting. I stepped out of the car with the folder of legal instructions in one hand and a quiet storm brewing in my chest. Everything Marin had told me pulsed through my mind. Stall record document observe. Let them believe I was crumbling. Let them believe they were close. I walked into the cabin and locked the door behind me. For a moment I stood still, listening to the familiar creaks of the wood, the low hum of the heater, the wind brushing against the siding. This home had carried me through heartbreak, through Ellie's first steps, through lonely winters and timid triumphs. And now it was going to carry me through battle. I placed the folder on the kitchen table and began unpacking the box of mini cameras I'd bought earlier. They were small, matte black, silent, barely bigger than a matchbox. 6 of them, enough to cover every angle they'd try to exploit. The first went in the living room, tucked into the shadowed corner of a bookshelf. I checked the feed on my tablet. Crisp, wide angle, audio clean. The second went above the kitchen cabinets, angled toward the table, where Sloane always hovered like she owned the place. The third in the hallway, catching the approach to the office, the room she always tried to peek into. The fourth on the porch, just beneath the eaves, silent and sharp-eyed. 2 more for good measure, because if I'd learned anything from them, it was that people like Sloane always had another angle. By the time I finished, the tablet displayed a mosaic of rooms I'd never seen from these angles before. It felt strange, like watching my own life from the outside. But it also felt like clarity, like stepping into truth after months of shadows. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote at the top case timeline. Below it, I began listing everything: Sloane's visit with muffins, Evan showing up, unannounced rumors in town, false concern from neighbors, suspicious daycare, inquiry, LLC creation, forged signature, pending transfer, fake notary stamp, handwriting sharpened with each entry. The fog that had clung to me for months lifted, replaced with something colder and stronger. I was building a record, a truth, a defense. I was also building something else, an offense. Around 6:30, headlights flashed up the driveway. My breath caught. It wasn't Sloane. It was Evan. He parked crookedly, engine idling for a long moment before he crawled out with that performative concern he wore like cologne. I met him on the porch before he could knock. "What are you doing here?" He looked startled, then tried to recover. "Just checking in. Wanted to see how you and Ellie are doing." My voice softened, exactly as Marin had told me. "It's been a lot," I said, letting my shoulders droop. "I'm tired." His eyes lit up almost imperceptibly. Predators glow when they smell weakness. "I figured," he said, gently stepping closer. "That's why I came. I wanted to help." Help how he glanced past me into the cabin. "Just support Harper. This place is beautiful, but it's a lot for you to manage alone. I've been thinking maybe I should take a bigger role. With Ellie, with decisions." My stomach tightened, but my expression stayed soft. "That's thoughtful," I murmured. "I just don't know what to do." He nodded sympathetically, like he was comforting a sick patient. "You're handling so much. Maybe too much." He tried the office doorknob without looking at it, casual, smooth, practiced. The camera caught every second. I felt heat crawl up my spine, but I didn't react. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I just feel overwhelmed." His smile sharpened. "It's okay. You can lean on us." Us. He didn't even try to hide it. Sloane had her claws in him, or maybe he'd put himself in her hands willingly. After a minute of empty reassurances and faux sympathy, he squeezed my shoulder and left. His taillights vanished down the hill, leaving only darkness behind. I walked straight to the tablet and played back the footage. There he was, trying the doorknob, glancing around like he was memorizing the layout, whispering under his breath. Almost done. Almost done. With what, my jaw clenched. I recorded the clip, saved it, backed it up twice, and sent it to Marin, with one sentence: "He's involved." She replied instantly. "Good. Keep recording. They'll push harder." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I did neither. I just sat at the table, breathing slowly, letting the tension settle. Ellie came home sleepy from a playdate. She tugged at my robe and whispered, "Mommy, why did Aunt Sloane say we might live somewhere else soon?" My breath hitched. She said that Ellie nodded, eyes wide. She said I'd like the city better, that this house was too much work for you. I inhaled, forcing calm. "Sweetheart, none of that is true. This is our home. No one is taking it." She nodded slowly, trusting me completely. The trust of a child who sees you as the whole world. I carried her to bed, brushed her hair from her forehead, kissed her cheek. As she drifted off, I promised her silently that I would do whatever it took to protect her life here. When the house finally fell quiet, I checked my phone. A new message from Sloane. "Can we talk tomorrow morning? You seemed overwhelmed last week. I'm worried about you." Worried. That word again, worn and poisonous. I typed out a deliberate response, fingers steady. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need help. Her reply came less than a second later. I'm so glad. I'll come by early. We'll sort everything out. I stared at the message, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Tomorrow she would come here believing she was winning. She would bring more papers, more lies, more narratives she'd rehearsed. She would try to corner me, and for the first time I wouldn't be cornered. I'd be ready. I rose from the table, turned off the lights, and walked slowly to the porch. The night was cold, pine-scented air sweeping across my skin. The mountains stood still and endless, silent witnesses to everything unfolding. I whispered into the darkness, not a plea, but a vow. You're not going to take anything from me. Not my home, not my daughter, not my life. Inside, the cameras blinked their tiny red dots of readiness. Tomorrow she'd step into the cabin like she always did, confident, certain, entitled. But this time, every word she said would become evidence. Every lie recorded, every threat time-stamped, every attempt documented. Tomorrow the trap would begin to close, and she wouldn't even see it. I woke before sunrise, long before any alarm, long before any bird dared interrupt the quiet. The world outside was still dark, a deep blue fading at the edges where morning would soon press through. I moved quietly, not wanting to disturb Ellie. She slept soundly at my friend's place in town, a sleepover I'd arranged under the guise of a little fun. In reality, it was part of the plan, part of keeping her safe while I did something uncomfortable but necessary. I dressed in silence, pulled on boots, grabbed my keys, and placed a small overnight bag in the passenger seat. Anyone watching would think I was leaving for a few days. That was the point. Sloane and Evan would hear about it, and if they believed the cabin was empty, they'd act. Desperation always pushes people to reveal themselves. I left my driveway, deliberately, headlights sweeping across the pines as I descended the mountain road. A familiar ache twisted in my chest at the thought of leaving even temporarily, but this wasn't abandonment. This was strategy. At the diner in town, I made myself visible, sat by the window, ordered breakfast I barely touched. Let the regulars see me, nod to me, smile politely. Let them unknowingly become witnesses. Oh, taking a little trip, the waitress asked after noticing my bag. Just a few days, I said lightly, sipping coffee. Needed a break. She nodded sympathetically, and that was that. Perfect. After I paid, I drove to a friend's property a few roads over, parked behind her shed, and walked through the woods back to my cabin. The cold pressed against my skin, but adrenaline kept me warm. Needles crackled under my boots. Every sound felt magnified. When I slipped through the back door, the house was empty, silent still, exactly how it needed to appear. I closed the blinds and moved to the back storage room, the only room without cameras, where I'd hidden a small folding chair, a thermos, and my tablet. Then I waited. Hours dragged by, slow and heavy. I checked the feeds every few minutes. Porch empty. Driveway empty. The wind picked up rattling branches like impatient fingers tapping on glass. Around 2 p.m, the motion alert pinged. My heart thudded. I tapped the screen. A car was turning into the driveway. Sloane's SUV. Right behind her, Evan's car. I felt a sharp electric jolt, not fear, but a chilling confirmation. I adjusted the volume and leaned closer to the tablet pulse, steadying into something cold and controlled. They climbed out quickly, moving with purpose. Sloane in a long coat, hair pulled back tight. Evan with a manila folder tucked under his arm. They spoke quietly, too quietly, but the cameras caught enough. "You're sure she's gone?" Evan whispered. "She told half the town she was taking a trip," Sloane snapped. "This is our chance." My stomach twisted, but I stayed perfectly still. Sloane approached the porch, glancing around like a thief checking for witnesses. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a key. My key, the duplicate she must have stolen weeks ago. She tried the lock. The knob didn't turn. Her jaw clenched. I'd changed it after Marin's advice. She must have switched the locks, Evan hissed. What now? Sloane glared at the door, then motioned toward the garden shed. Evan jogged over, knelt by the fake rock where my spare used to be, and lifted it. Nothing. She moved it, he groaned. Then check the windows, Sloane snapped. We're not leaving without going inside. I paced silently inside, my tiny hiding space fingers gripping the tablet. Every muscle in my body was tense, but I'd prepared for this. I knew they'd try to get in, and they'd find a way. After circling the cabin, Sloane returned to the front door and pulled out a small metal lockbox. When she opened it, the camera caught the gleam of another spare key, another one she'd stolen. She slid it into the lock and turned. The door opened. I exhaled slowly, watching them step inside. Sloane entered first, her heels tapping across my wooden floor, her eyes sweeping the cabin with satisfaction. Empty, she murmured. Good, finally. Evan followed, flipping on lights like he owned the place. Let's get what we need. The living room camera captured their faces perfectly as they moved through the space without hesitation. No fear, no guilt, just entitlement. Sloane picked up a framed photo of Ellie and me from the mantel. She studied it with a strange mix of contempt and victory before setting it face down. She should have just signed the paperwork, she muttered. Would have been easier for everyone. Evan wandered into the kitchen, opening drawers, cabinets, the pantry. Once the papers go through, we'll list it immediately. Property like this, we could get 7 figures. Easy. 7 figures. They were talking about my daughter's home like it was a scratched-off lottery ticket. Sloane opened my mail, flipping through envelopes. She still pays the utility bills. Cute considering she won't be living here much longer. My nails dug into my palms. Then came the moment I prayed they'd reveal it, slipped out of Sloane's mouth without hesitation. And once the cabin is in the LLC, she won't have any legal standing. Evan, your custody petition will go smoothly. Custody petition. The words made my blood run cold. Before I could process that, Evan pulled a document from his jacket. I have the draft ready. It paints her as overwhelmed and emotionally unstable. Exactly what everyone's been saying. What everyone's been saying. The rumors. The concerned looks. The whispered questions. This was how they'd orchestrated it. Sloane smirked. Judges always side with stability. A single mother drowning in responsibilities she'll fold. My breath stilled in my chest. They weren't just trying to take my home, they were trying to take Ellie. Sloane walked toward the office door, testing the knob. Locked. She stepped back, irritated. She hides everything, but we'll get what we need. Evan pulled out his phone, snapping photos of every room, zooming in on shelves, documents, anything that could fit their narrative. Good, Sloane said. This proves we were here legally. She gave us access. I nearly laughed aloud, dark disbelieving. Legally, with stolen keys. Then the sentence that sealed everything. Tomorrow, Sloane said, straightening her coat. We start the process. She won't see it coming. She would see it coming. In fact, I was watching it unfold in real time. Evan checked one last drawer. Let's go. We have what we need. They left as arrogantly as they'd arrived, turning off none of the lights, leaving the cabin feeling tainted and foreign. Sloane locked the door behind her, returning the stolen key to her coat like it was a trophy. As their cars rolled down the driveway, disappearing into the dusk, the silence returned. I stayed frozen for several minutes. Not afraid, not shocked, just burning with a quiet, controlled fury. Finally, I stepped out of the storage room and into the living room. I replayed the footage again and again, capturing each incriminating detail, saving files, backing them up on the cloud, emailing them to Marin with the subject line they broke in. Her reply was immediate. Do not confront. I'm contacting the sheriff. Stay safe. I walked to the front door, opened it, and let the cold mountain air fill my lungs. My hands trembled not with fear but with adrenaline. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was alone. They thought I was weak. But they had no idea what I'd done. And tomorrow morning, when they returned with movers and forged papers and confidence dripping off their smiles, that's when everything they'd built would collapse. The security alarm shattered the silence at exactly 5 in the morning, a single piercing tone that echoed through the cabin like a warning bell. I sat up instantly, heart steady, breath controlled. I'd been expecting this, waiting for it, really. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. The screen lit up with the name of the security guard I'd hired 2 weeks ago, Caleb. I answered on the first ring. "Miss Lane, I'm sorry to wake you." He sounded rattled. "Your sister is at the gate. She's brought a moving truck. 3 men. They're saying they have authority to access the property." Of course they were. Right on schedule. "What exactly did she say?" I asked, swinging my legs out of bed, feet hitting the cold floor. "She claims the deed was transferred to her yesterday," he said. "She has paperwork she wants me to log as proof. She's demanding I let her through." My voice stayed calm, smooth. "Let them in, Caleb." He hesitated, breath hitching. "Are you sure? Should I call the sheriff?" "No. Just make sure she signs the visitor log with her full name and the time. And note the reason for her visit." "Understood. But are you safe?" The word pressed against something hard inside me. "I'm fine," I said. "Just let them through." I hung up, then grabbed my robe, tying it at the waist as I walked through the dim cabin. I approached the window overlooking the driveway. The truck rolled in first, its headlights sweeping across the pines. Behind it, Sloane's SUV, then Evan's car. 3 vehicles, 3 men, and 1 sister who believed she had already won. I picked up my tablet from the kitchen counter and unlocked it. The 6 camera feeds flickered to life: porch, living room, kitchen, hallway, driveway, office window. Every angle was covered. Every lie she brought would be recorded. Outside, the movers climbed out of the truck. They looked confused, uneasy, already wary of the woman barking orders at them. Sloane stepped out last, slamming her door. She wore a fitted coat, hair, slicked back, eyes sharp and cold in the floodlights. She marched toward the porch. I moved to the front door and waited in silence just behind it. She banged on the wood so hard the frame rattled. "Harper, open up. You don't live here anymore." The words might have hurt once. Now they were just evidence. She pounded again. "I have the deed. You agreed to move out yesterday." In the driveway, one mover scratched his head, moved out. "There's furniture everywhere. Just start packing," she snapped. "Get everything into the truck. The place is mine." Still, I didn't open the door. I wanted the officer to arrive first. And right on cue, red and blue lights appeared at the edge of the driveway. A patrol car pulled up slowly, dust rising behind it. My pulse stayed calm. The trap had sprung. The doorbell rang, and this time I opened it not because of Sloane, but because the officer stood at the bottom of the stairs, flashlight in hand, assessing everything with measured professionalism. Sloane spun around. "Finally," she shouted, waving the forged papers. "Can you tell her she needs to leave? She's trespassing on my property." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, let me take a look." I stepped onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind me. I held my coffee cup as if nothing unusual was happening at all. "Good morning," I said softly. Sloane's face drained of color. "You're here. You were supposed to be gone." "Gone where?" I asked, tilting my head. "This is my home." "That's a lie." She thrust the papers toward the officer. "She signed it over yesterday." The officer examined the documents carefully under the beam of her flashlight. Her expression shifted slightly. "Miss Lane, the notary registration number is invalid." Sloane blinked. "What? No, that's impossible." And the officer continued, "According to county records, this property is held in a private trust with protected status. That means ownership cannot be transferred without the trustee's approval." "Are you the trustee?" "I am," I said. Sloane stared, stunned. No, this must be some sort of mistake." Another patrol car pulled in behind the first. The second officer approached the porch. "We received a report of suspected fraud and unauthorized entry." Evan stepped forward, fast palms raised. "We were invited here. Harper asked us to help. She's overwhelmed. She gave us keys." "I didn't give anyone keys," I replied. The officer nodded. We have video of Miss Sloane Lane using a key to enter the residence 3 days ago while the homeowner was absent. That did it. One of the movers muttered, "Oh hell," and backed toward the truck. Sloane turned on me, eyes wild. You recorded me. You set me up. No, I said quietly. You set yourself up. I just didn't stop you. The officer held up the papers again. Miss Lane, you're in possession of forged legal documents, a fraudulent notary stamp, and you are trespassing. I'm going to need you to step aside. Sloane's voice cracked. No, you don't understand, she's unstable. Everyone knows it. I was helping her. The officer didn't blink. We'll sort that out at the station. Evan tried again, desperation creeping in. She's lying. She's manipulating you. She can't handle this place alone. I sipped my coffee calmly. You told a man at the gas station that I shouldn't be raising Ellie. Did you think that wouldn't get back to me? His mouth snapped closed. The officer asked, Do either of you have permission to be here? No, I answered before they could speak. That was enough. The officers moved in. One took the forged documents. The other took Sloane's arms to guide her toward the patrol car. She fought at first, breathing fast, muttering, This isn't happening. She's nothing. She doesn't deserve, but she went. Evan wasn't arrested, not yet, but the officer told him to leave the property immediately. His face twisted with rage and embarrassment. This isn't over, he hissed. It is, I said. You just don't know it yet. He drove off without another word. The movers apologized profusely and left without touching a single thing. Finally, the driveway was empty. Quiet again, peace slipping back into the morning like a gentle tide. The lead officer approached me. We'll need statements later today. But from what we've seen, you handled this exactly right. You recorded everything, yes. Good. It'll help the prosecutor. After she drove away, I stood alone on the porch for a long moment. The sun had begun to rise over the ridge, filling the sky with pale gold and soft pink. My hands shook now, not from fear, but from the release of holding everything inside for so long. I stepped inside the cabin, closed the door softly, and leaned against it. The house was warm, familiar, safe. Not stolen, not taken. Still mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Marin. It's done. They won't get another chance. Call me when you can. I sank into a chair, breath shaking out of me at last. They had tried to steal my home. They had tried to paint me as unstable. They had tried to take my daughter. They had worked together confident in their deception. And this morning they discovered just how wrong they were. Because yesterday I'd done the one thing they never expected. I'd taken all my power back. Daniel showed up around 10 in the morning, gravel crunching beneath his tires, as he pulled into the driveway with a kind of urgency I'd never seen from him before. I watched from the porch arms, folded coffee cooling in my hands. His face was tense as he climbed out of the car, confused, pale, already bracing himself for something he didn't want to hear. He hadn't even closed his door before blurting Harper what happened. The sheriff's office called me. They said Sloane was detained. Evan, too. What is going on? His voice cracked on her name. He still believed she was the image she always sold him. Compassionate, supportive, loyal. He didn't know the woman behind the mask. Not yet. I stepped back into the cabin, holding the door open. Come in, Daniel. We need to talk. He hesitated for a heartbeat, then followed me inside. The moment he stepped into the living room, his eyes swept across the space lights. Still on from the early chaos, a blanket half tossed on the couch, the faint smell of adrenaline in the air. He turned slowly, his baffled expression tightening. Harper, what am I supposed to think? They said Sloane tried to break in, that she had forged documents. He said the word forged like it hurt him to even imagine it. I gestured toward the kitchen table where my folder lay open like a wound. Sit, I said gently. I'll show you. He sat stiffly, hands clasped, knuckles white. I pulled the first sheet from the folder, the LLC registration with my forged signature, and placed it in front of him. He stared at it. What is this, the company your sister created? With my name on it. Without my consent. That can't be right, he whispered. She wouldn't do that. She did. He looked up at me, eyes searching, begging me to give him another explanation. Something easier. Something that didn't unravel the woman he thought he knew. She told me she was helping you, he said. She said you were drowning up here. That the stress, that Ellie. It was too much. I swallowed a bitter lump in my throat. She wanted custody, Daniel. Of Ellie. She and Evan planned it together. The words hit him like a physical blow. He flinched. No, she wouldn't. I opened the next file, the county recorder screen capture, showing a pending transfer. Then the fake notary stamp. Then the forged deed. His breath stuttered. He ran a hand through his hair, fingers trembling. This isn't real, he muttered. This can't be happening. I didn't interrupt. I let him see it, sit with it, feel it. Finally, I opened the tablet and played the footage from the day before. Him trying the office door, her rummaging through my home, him whispering almost done, Sloane saying, once the cabin is in the LLC, she can't stop us. And then the worst part, once she loses the house, Evan's custody petition will go through. I watched the exact moment the truth cracked him open. His jaw slackened, his shoulders caved inward. His entire body seemed to fold under the weight of betrayal. That can't be her voice, he whispered. Tell me someone edited that. Tell me it's her, I said softly. He buried his face in his hands. For a long time he didn't move, didn't speak, just breathed ragged, shaking breaths of someone mourning a person who still walked the earth. After several minutes he lifted his head. His eyes were red, his voice was hoarse. How long has she been doing this? Months, I said. Maybe longer. And she pulled me into it, I nodded. She made you part of the plan without telling you what the plan was. He swallowed hard, staring at the table. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. I swear to you, Harper, I had no idea. She told me you were slipping, that you were forgetting things, that the cabin was too much. I thought, he closed his eyes. I believed her. I didn't even ask you if it was true. The guilt in his voice was heavy, raw. I reached across the table and rested my hand on his. Manipulators choose people who trust, I said quietly. You trusted her. That's not a crime. He shook his head. But I didn't trust you. I didn't respond. There wasn't anything I could say that would make that sting any less. He wiped his face with the heel of his hand. I should have noticed something was off. I should have asked more questions. I should have, Daniel, I interrupted gently. If she fooled the sheriff, fooled the county clerk, fooled half the town, you weren't going to see it. None of us did until it was almost too late. His gaze dropped to the forged documents again. She was going to empty your accounts, he whispered. Take your house. Take Ellie. He looked up, horror carved into every line of his face. What kind of person does that? Someone who thinks she's untouchable. Someone who's gotten away with too much for too long. Someone who thought I would fold. She underestimated me, I said simply. And she underestimated how much I would fight for Ellie. He nodded weakly. I want to make this right. Tell me how. I sat back, breathing deeply, steady as I explained. Right now the case is in the sheriff's hands. Fraud, forgery, trespassing. Elder exploitation doesn't apply to me, but property exploitation does. She'll face charges. He winced at the word charges. And what about Evan? He asked quietly. He walked into my home with her. He tried to open my office door. He's in this whether he wants to admit it or not. Daniel exhaled long and pained. I need to talk to him. No, I said immediately. Not yet. Let the law move first. Don't interfere, he nodded reluctantly. After a moment, he asked the question I'd been expecting. Do you want me in Ellie's life still? The ache that flooded me was deep, surprising. Yes, I said softly. As long as you're safe for her, as long as you stay on the side of the truth. He nodded, tears silently spilling over. I will. I promise. For a long time, we just sat there, two exhausted adults in a small mountain cabin that had been transformed into a battleground of manipulation and survival. The sun rose higher through the windows, spreading gold across the floor. Eventually, he stood. "I'm filing for a divorce," he said quietly. "Today," I nodded. "Good, I'll send you updates," he continued. "And I'll be back tonight. To help. Not interfere, just help." He paused in the doorway, looking back at me with a mixture of grief and gratitude. "You didn't just save your home," he said. "You saved me too." When he drove away, the driveway fell quiet again. I closed the door, leaned against it, and finally let myself breathe slow and deep. Today wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, and the truth had finally torn everything open. Ellie came home that afternoon with a backpack full of crayons, a snack wrapper stuck to her sweater, and a burst of excitement that broke through the heaviness of the last 24 hours. She ran straight into my arms the moment she stepped out of my friend's car, small hands gripping my coat like she hadn't seen me in years. "Mommy," she squealed, her face buried against my shoulder. "Miss Tara let me stay up late, and we made popcorn and I watched a movie with talking animals." Her joy was so pure it almost hurt. I smoothed her hair, breathing in the scent of shampoo and sunshine. "I'm so glad you had fun, sweetheart." My friend gave me a quiet nod, her gaze full of questions I wasn't ready to answer yet. "She was perfect," she said softly. "Call me if you need anything." When her car drove away, the driveway was once again just ours, quiet, still surrounded by towering pine trees that had watched everything unfold without judgment. Inside, Ellie skipped toward the living room, humming to herself. She didn't notice the faint tension in my shoulders, or the locked drawers, or the new quiet in the cabin. She just plopped onto the rug and started coloring like the world was safe and simple. I wished it were. Later, while she napped, I took a cup of tea onto the back porch and watched the clouds drift over the ridge. The storm inside me had mostly settled, but its echoes still lingered like the ringing after a slammed door. I thought about everything that had happened: the forged documents, the break-in, the custody plan, the betrayal, and the relief. For months I'd been fighting a battle I couldn't name. Now it finally had a shape, a beginning and end. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. The screen door creaked, and I turned to see Daniel standing in the doorway. He looked tired. Really tired, in a way that felt older than his 32 years. "Can I join you?" he asked quietly. I nodded, sliding over on the porch step. He sat beside me, elbows on his knees, staring at the forest like he was searching for something meaningful in the shadows between the trees. "Did she always hate you?" he asked, after a long silence. It took me a moment to answer. No. When we were little, she wanted to braid my hair and share her toys. But something changed as we got older. She always wanted what someone else had: a grade, a compliment, a friend, a dream. And she started believing everything was owed to her. Daniel swallowed hard, and she saw what you built and decided she deserved it instead. "Yes," I whispered. She decided being my sister meant entitlement, not love. He let out a shaky breath. "She told me you were unstable, that you were slipping, that you'd forget Ellie at daycare." She said it with so much confidence that I started to think maybe I should keep an eye on you. The shame in his voice cut deeper than any accusations Sloane had thrown my way. "It's okay," I said gently. "People who lie with conviction are the most convincing. You weren't wrong to trust your sister. You were wrong to trust the version she wanted you to see." He didn't look convinced. To distract him, and maybe myself too, I pulled out the notebook where I had been writing everything down. I flipped to a page near the back filled with dates, times, and short phrases, snippets of things people had said to me in town. He read some of them aloud under his breath. "She seems overwhelmed lately. I think the cabin is too much for her. Is Harper okay? She forgot something at the register." He shook his head, devastated. "She was poisoning the well everywhere you went." "Yes, and I didn't see the pattern until it was almost too late." His voice cracked. "And she dragged me into it." I touched his arm gently. Daniel, listen to me. Manipulators don't just deceive their victims, they deceive their allies too. She used you. She used your trust, your compassion. Those aren't weaknesses, they're strengths she weaponized. He stared at me for a long moment, eyes shining. But you're not responsible for her choices, I continued. She is. Every lie, every forged signature, every whisper. He swallowed again, but this time he nodded. We sat there quietly, until Ellie's small footsteps tapped across the floor inside. Mommy, she called. Can I have a snack? I stood and lifted her into my arms. Of course, baby. She wrapped her arms around my neck, warm and sleepy. Daniel stood as well, watching her in a way that made something inside him soften. Harper, he said carefully, I want to do better. Be better. Protect Ellie with you. Not as some legal technicality Sloane wanted to manipulate, but because she deserves love from people who truly care. And because you deserve support, not suspicion. A lump formed in my throat. I want that too, I said quietly. We went inside together, and the warmth of the cabin wrapped around us like a quilt. Ellie pointed at her crayons, asking Daniel to color with her. He dropped to the floor immediately, letting her hand him the blue marker as if she'd commanded a king. For a moment, the room felt full again, bright, hopeful, almost normal. But normal had a new meaning now. While they colored, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from the sheriff's department. Your statement is complete. Charges have been filed. You will be notified of the hearing dates. Another message followed seconds later from Marin. Sloane's attorney contacted the office. They're aiming for a plea deal. I'll explain everything tonight. You did the right thing. I set the phone down, staring at the wooden grain of the counter. This chapter of my life was almost closed. Almost. After dinner, once Ellie was tucked in bed, Daniel sat with me by the fire, its flickering light warming the edges of our exhaustion. I keep thinking about yesterday, he said. About how close she was, how close I unknowingly helped her get. I closed my eyes for a moment. I know. And I keep thinking, he continued, if she'd succeeded, none of this would be here. Ellie wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. And I would have been part of the reason why. His voice broke in half. I touched his hand gently. But she didn't succeed. He nodded, wiping his eyes. And you're here now, I said. That's what matters. He leaned back against the couch, exhausted. What happens next, honestly, I said. We breathe. We rebuild. We tell Ellie the truth when she's older. We teach her what manipulation looks like so she never falls into the same trap. And Sloane, I stared into the fire where the flames curled and cracked like old secrets breaking apart. She'll face consequences, I said softly. Maybe she'll learn from them, maybe she won't. But her power over our lives is gone. For the first time all day, I felt something steady inside me. Not triumph, not vengeance, peace. Not because justice had been served, but because the truth had finally been spoken. And once truth enters a room, lies have nowhere left to hide. Spring arrived faster than I expected, spreading warmth through the mountains like someone had quietly lifted a heavy blanket. Snow melted from the roof in slow drips. The creek behind the cabin roared louder each day. Wildflowers pushed through the thawing ground, yellow, purple, and white bursts of color, reclaiming the forest. For the first time in months, the world around me felt alive again. Ellie and I spent mornings on the back porch, wrapped in a shared blanket, sipping hot cocoa and pointing at the deer that passed through the clearing. In the afternoons, we planted herbs in the small garden behind the cabin, basil for summer recipes, mint for tea, rosemary, because the smell reminded me of peace. Life settled into something steady, something safe, something ours. It took nearly 6 weeks for the legal process to finish winding its way through hearings, paperwork, and negotiations. But the outcome was clear long before the final signatures dried. Sloane accepted a plea agreement for forgery, attempted fraud, and trespassing. She received probation, mandatory financial counseling, community service, and a no-contact order requiring her to stay at least 500 feet away from me and Ellie and my property for the next 5 years. The fake notary she hired faced separate charges. Evan tried to wiggle out of everything, but the footage of him assisting the recorded whispers and his attempted participation in the custody plan didn't go unnoticed. He wasn't charged criminally, but the judge restricted him from making any contact with Ellie unless supervised by the court and required him to attend mandatory counseling. He moved to another town 2 weeks later. The silence after all of it was strangely loud. One afternoon in early May, I sat at the kitchen table reviewing the last piece of paperwork from the prosecutor's office. When I reached the final page and stamped approval, I felt a pressure release from my chest, like I had been holding my breath for months, and finally remembered how to exhale. Daniel knocked on the door a few minutes later, carrying a bag of groceries and a cautious smile. "Thought I'd cook dinner," he said, as a thank you. And an "I'm sorry," and probably a dozen other things. I stepped aside to let him in. "Only if you let me help." We cooked together while Ellie danced around the kitchen, singing a nonsense song about pasta tornadoes. Daniel laughed at every lyric. I watched them both, the warmth in my chest mingling with something bittersweet. For so long I'd braced myself against betrayal. Now I was relearning how to let people close again. Dinner was simple pasta with roasted vegetables, but it tasted like a fresh beginning. After we finished eating, Ellie ran outside to chase fireflies, leaving the two of us alone in the soft glow of the kitchen. Daniel ran his hand over his face. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he said. "Not just what Sloan did, but what I believed. The things I let in without questioning." "You were manipulated," I said softly. "You weren't malicious." "I still should have known," he said. "I was your brother. I should have seen you needed help." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "You see me now, that's enough." He looked at me with a gratitude so deep it almost hurt to hold. "I want to be someone Ellie can depend on," he said. "And someone you can depend on too." "You already are," I said. "And you always will be." We sat there in the quiet for a long time, warmed by the fireplace, the sound of Ellie laughing outside, drifting through the open window. Later that night, after Daniel left, I stepped onto the back porch and breathed in the cool spring air. The sky above the mountains glimmered with stars. The trees swayed lightly, whispering secrets only the forest understood. I wrapped my robe tighter and sat down, leaning back against the wooden railing. The cabin looked peaceful from where I sat, soft lights glowing from the windows, the familiar smell of pine drifting across the yard. This place had been targeted, invaded, threatened, and yet it stood strong. So did I. Strength didn't always look like shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes it looked like documentation, quiet planning, quiet readiness, quiet truth. Sometimes it looked like the voice of a tired woman saying, "No more." And sometimes it looked like a mother holding her daughter close and deciding that no one would ever take her home away. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the moment settle into my bones. The fight was over, but I wasn't the same woman who'd entered it. I was wiser now. Sharper, more patient, more powerful, in ways that didn't need to be loud to be real. And I refused to ever let anyone mistake my silence for surrender again. Ellie's laughter echoed across the yard, and I opened my eyes. She ran toward me with a jar full of glowing fireflies, her smile bright and wild. "Mommy, look!" she cried. I smiled, pulling her into my lap. "They're beautiful," I whispered. "Just like you." She leaned her head on my shoulder, blinking sleepily, as the fireflies glowed between her small hands. "Are we safe now?" she asked softly. I kissed the top of her head. "Yes," I said, "we are." And I meant it. Before I end this story, let me ask you something from the heart, because you've stayed with me through every twist, every betrayal, every moment of fear and fire. If any part of this journey resonated with you, if you've ever stood up to someone who tried to take what was yours, if you've ever fought quietly for your dignity or your peace, Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one, and if you want more stories like this, more moments of truth and revenge and triumph, make sure you like this video and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Your support means more than you know. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and never let anyone steal the life you've built.